Welcome to Law Talk Today, a series devoted to bringing you informative and educational programs focused on issues of law, government, and community. Hello, and welcome to Law Talk Today. I'm Dan Agatino, your host. Joining us in studio today is John Williams, attorney at the law firm of Gruber, Colabella, Liuzza, and Williams. John, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So I wanted to talk today about criminal issues, specifically as they manifest in municipal courts. I know you do a lot of work in municipal courts, and I thought maybe we could just start with an overview.
Okay, well, probably the best place to start with the municipal courts would be what we call the territorial jurisdiction, which just means what's the geographic area that they cover. Most towns have a municipal court in them. So the territorial jurisdiction of a municipal court is an individual town or city in the state. There are some courts which we call joint courts, which would involve several towns that are combined into one court if the towns are small and maybe the work can be handled and there can be some overlap. And there's more and more of those, I think, as time goes on, because as a cost-saving measure, they're starting to combine some of the courts. But essentially, for all intents and purposes, you have a municipal court in your town. And the next sort of fundamental concept would be, what's their subject matter jurisdiction, which means what are the topic areas that people would have to go to a municipal court for, or that a municipal court would cover. The most obvious one that most people are familiar with is our motor vehicle charges or moving violations. So any type of motor vehicle or traffic fines or summonses that you might get are handled in the municipal court. So quite simply, things like speeding tickets, not coming to the stop at a stop sign, driving while suspended, and even up to the most serious motor vehicle charge, which would be things like driving while suspended, and of course DWI, which in New Jersey is a motor vehicle charge.
Just so people know, what does DWI stand for?
Driving while intoxicated.
Driving while intoxicated.
Sure, all done in New Jersey in municipal court level. There are other types of even more serious charges that can be handled in municipal court. In New Jersey, we call them disorderly person offenses and petty disorderly person offenses. On TV, most people know them as misdemeanors. So in TV, you hear felony and misdemeanor. We use different terminology in New Jersey, but that can be handled in municipal court. And those would be things like simple assaults, could be a misdemeanor type charge, harassment type charges, drunken disorderly, these types of things are handled in the municipal court. The municipal court also handles local ordinances, so that's the laws that your town has. There are ordinances for each town which could govern everything from how you put your trash out to parking or any types of individual laws that are on the books for your town or city if you live in a city in New Jersey. And those charges, if they're written against you, are handled in the municipal court. And then there's things like fish and game laws are handled there. We run into that in Sussex County and in Morris County, anywhere where there's state parks, and those tickets might be written there, or any type of like fish and game type summons. And there's a couple of other ones which aren't really important, but they're anything where the legislature has written a statute that says, hey, we want this handled in the municipal court. If there's some type of fine to be collected or some type of lower tier type charge.
So it's by statute that we find out if you're going to a superior court or you're going to go to a local court?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It gets a little more complicated than that, but essentially there's some statutes which might direct that the jurisdiction's in the municipal court. Like sometimes the state might be collecting a fine against somebody, and that can be collected in the municipal court, and that judge would handle the collection action. There's one other category, too. Sometimes juveniles can be in municipal court. For the most part, if there's criminal-type charges written against a juvenile, if there's any type of behavioral-type charges, they're handled in the juvenile court, which is up in the superior court. But juveniles can be in the municipal court, of course, if they have a permit and they're driving and they have a violation, like a violation on their permit, out too late or too many kids in the cars, they're in the car, not having the right person in the car with them. That can be handled in the municipal court. And then truancy, also, those charges are handled in the municipal court. That's actually against the parent, but the kid can be brought into court, too.
Which means that if a child is supposed to be in school and is not attending, parent gets to go before the judge.
That's correct. That's right.
So those are some of the subject matters. If a person does get called into court, tell us a little bit about the process.
There's two ways, really. The most common one and the most known one to most people is if you get a summons. If you get pulled over and the officer writes you a ticket for speeding, or God forbid something more serious like a DWI or driving while suspended, which is a serious charge in New Jersey unlike some other states, then you get a summons. People know the summons are the rectangular tickets. They fill them out, they have your driver's license, they have address, they have information about the charge, they're numbered, they all go into a system. If it's a more serious charge like a disorderly person's offense or a petty disorderly person's offense, then they go on what's called a complaint, which is just a bigger sheet of paper. It's like an 8.5 by 11 size sheet of paper, and it'll state what the complaint is against you. Usually you're handed the complaint or the summons by the officer, but they can mail them. So sometimes I have clients call, or even just consults, potential clients, who are upset because they were pulled over. Maybe there was an accident or something, and they didn't think that they were charged with anything, but the officer makes a decision later after he or she goes back to the station and issues a charge, and then the person gets one in the mail within the statute of limitations time frame, and they're often very upset or surprised by it. So you can be mailed these charges, but typically you're handed them by the police officer.
Now, when you use the language statute of limitations time frame, what you're saying is if I get into an accident and then I go home and a week passes, I could still get a ticket. But there's laws that say 10 months can't pass in certain, depending on what the offense is, and I could still get a ticket, right? It differs based on what the offense is.
Exactly. So the easiest one is on most of your moving violations, it's 30 days.
Okay.
So it has to be written in 30 days. And it almost always is. The most common example where someone might get a ticket later in the mail is sometimes the officer has to do some further investigation or maybe just decides, what happened in a particular situation. But probably the most common one is where there's an accident and there's an investigation and a police report is issued, and which they have to do on any accident. And then the officer might decide later that one of the drivers was driving carelessly and will issue a summons for careless driving. And then that person gets it in the mail.
So I get a summons. The cop hands it to me there. What happens next?
Well, what you'll see on the summons, other than all the information about who you are, what your driver's license is, there'll be a section towards the middle of the ticket where it'll say what you're charged with. And it'll say what the offense is. So for the sake of argument, say it's speeding. It'll tell you were speeding. It'll cite the statute number.